Hi, thanks so much for being here. I'm Lindsey, and I'm very honored to be sitting up here with two amazing entrepreneurial women, Huda Idrees and Christina Stembel. Huda is currently starting a new healthcare startup. I'm going to let her tell you more about that. But previously was former head of product and design at Wealthsimple, which is a financial services startup, and designer at Wave and Wattpad. As well. So lots of entrepreneurial experiences that she'll draw from during our discussion today. And Christina is currently the founder and CEO at Farmgirl Flowers, and I'm going to let her tell you a lot more about that. You may have seen a blog post that the Lean Startup Conference put out about the work that she's been doing, but a lot of really awesome stories that I'm excited for her to share with you today. Before we get going, just a word on the topic of the panel. So, the discussion today is going to focus on our collective experiences working at and running startups, and our experience with the Lean Startup method is part of that. One important thing that the three of us have in common, as you can tell, is we're all women. So some of the questions will be directly related to being a woman running and working at a startup. But other questions won't. They'll be more generally about kind of lean startup methods and how we've employed them in the various roles we've worn. So just keep in mind, we're telling you that our experiences from the perspective of women, even if we're not directly talking about gender with every question. So when we get to the Q&A portion of this, I'd encourage you to ask questions specifically about kind of gender roles in startups, but by all means feel free to ask more general questions and just know that that's the perspective we bring to the startups we've been part of. So I'm going to lead off with some questions to get us started, but pretty quickly we'll turn to you so we can answer the questions that you all have. When we get to that point, I'll just invite you to come up to the mic and ask whatever questions you have, and we'll take it from there. So to kick things off, I'll ask each of you to just briefly introduce yourself, kind of the current role that you're in, and a little bit of how you got there as well.
Oh, perfect. Hi there. So my name is Christina Stembel, and I own an e-commerce flower company here in San Francisco called Farmgirl Flowers. We like to say, everybody says they're the Uber of. We are like Pro Flowers, but we think better. And that's in our opinion, to be very clear on that, legally speaking. So when we're in the gifting category, e-commerce, like I said, so birthdays, anniversaries, any kind of an occasion flower, also for yourself, just because is a great reason. You go to our website just like you would Pro Flowers, 1-800-Flowers, those guys. What we do different is we offer one daily arrangement instead of hundreds of options. And the reason we do that is because it limits our waste down to under 1%. Industry standard is about 40%. And we can offer consumers a designer quality arrangement at a generic e-commerce price. So you get a much better product for the price that you spend. And we started in 2000, I say we, the universal we. I started it from my dining room in 2010. And now we are about 82 employees here in Potrero Hill. And we ship nationwide.
Hi, my name is Huda. I'm based in Toronto. That's Canada, just north of here. The city you'll probably be migrating to if one of the presidential candidate wins. My story goes I went to engineering school, so I'm this engineering person who turned into a product designer who turned into an entrepreneur. And it all started because I turned down an offer to intern at Google. Google's like cool now, but it was like really cool 6 years ago. So it was weird that I was doing it, and I did it for this dinky little startup. They were in a tiny little room, and it was called Wattpad. They're now the largest storytelling platform out there for readers and writers. And that sort of made me realize how the inner workings of a business are done. I was part of 2 rounds of their financing. I got to see how they work, how the different roles develop over time, because in the beginning it's all generalists, and then you slowly start to find your specialty and go into that. And people who know me from Toronto know me as the girl who likes W's. So I worked at Wattpad, then Wave, then Wealthsimple most recently. And now I'm sort of, this is the first time I'm founding my own company. And it's really exciting, and I'm sort of drawing from all these experiences that I've had before. And it's frankly, it's scary. It's coming up against a lot of these things that you didn't think would be problems that you would have. So going back to the, like dinky little offices, I've converted one floor of my apartment into my office. So my team of 4 works out of my living room, and we will graduate out of that at some point. But that's where we're working right now. The new startup that I'm working on is in healthcare technology, and we believe healthcare is an industry that is deeply entrenched in a lot of regulation and archaic legacy systems. And my background in product design and my co-founder's background in operational excellence, we feel is the perfect fit to be able to tackle that market when it's sort of ripe for disruption, we believe.
Great. So we'll stay with you. One thing you guys have in common with your startups, and Huda, I'd say with the many startups that you've worked at before starting .health, is you are trying to disrupt industries with pretty deeply entrenched business models that have been around for a really long time. So can you talk a little bit about how the fact that you're disrupting entrenched models has sort of shaped your approach, and if you can reflect on kind of how the lean startup methodology has been involved in that approach, that would be great.
Yeah, totally. I read this book called Third Wave by Steve Case, whose closing remarks are happening later today that you should totally stick around for. And he talks about how the third wave of businesses is all about companies realizing that partnerships and policy are as important as product. So he says the second wave, which was like Facebook or Instagram, whatever, could start off in a garage and like people could adopt it and it would be okay. But the real change that's going to happen now will be these entrenched industries. And I feel like my experience at Wealthsimple, I can draw an almost exact parallel to healthcare, which was financial. And we're speaking to these financial regulators who are like, deeply concerned that we're going to put our investors' money like in these areas that are, super volatile, and we're going to lose all this money, and we're this like startup that doesn't know what they're doing or whatever. And you have to be able to build that trust with people in, I would say, given the startup methodology, in small bits of experiments. So as an example, we were developing an algorithm that better realized your risk tolerance. So Wealthsimple is a robo-advisor. For people who live in the area, it's like Wealthfront, but for Canadians. And what we did is sort of, literally sat down with the financial regulators being like, this is what my algorithm does. What do you think? And it wasn't out there, so customers weren't using it yet, but at least they could look at it and feel like they could trust us before moving forward and going sort of gangbusters on our area.
So for us, there was definitely, it's a big, the e-commerce space for flowers is about $3.2 billion, and 4 companies made up 3/4 of that. So I saw it as a great opportunity, because all 4 of those companies I would have to use if I sent my mother flowers in Indiana, and I didn't like what was out there, so I figured that there was probably a lot of people like me that also didn't like it. But when I pitched to investors initially, the response was all over the place, but one of the big things was, why would we invest in a company, in a company that's going into a space that's already so saturated and it's declining. It's not a growing market, and all the research I did showed that the reason it was declining and not growing were the same reasons that I was unsatisfied. And so I thought, I can fix this. The reason I didn't want to use those companies to send my mother flowers was the same reason that everybody else in my peer group didn't want to send flowers, which is why consumers were buying half the flowers they were 20 years ago, or 15 years ago. So I just thought, I actually saw it as a great opportunity that I could fix this, even if everybody else thought I was crazy. And I thought, well, if they think I'm crazy, that's good, because that means it gives me a little bit of a head start on competition, which it did. It gave me a couple of years before everybody copied us, or in my opinion, might have copied us. I really thought of it as I think it's a great thing that there's really big machines doing it and not doing it to my satisfaction. So it's something that I can disrupt.
Kind of on that vein, can you talk a little bit about your go-to-market strategy? I did read the really great story about kind of how you got your first MVP out there and started assessing kind of customer interest. So can you share that story with the group?
Definitely. So I started Farmgirl with $49,000. And to this date, we've never taken any capital. So that's all the money that's been invested in. And I thought that was a lot of money back then. I was really naive, and it went really fast. So one of my the reason I love lean startup methodology, the biggest thing I love about it is the MVP, because I have a lot of friends that spend years researching and rewriting business plans and having this, idea that's still percolating forever. And, I quit my job at Stanford in June, and we launched November 7th, and I was really ticked off that it took that long. I thought we were going to get it going much earlier than that. So I didn't have enough money to just prolong it for a long time. So that actually helped me. And the reason, one of the things that I've really learned is, I got it out there. It looked very different than it does now. The first year, I did $56,000 all year long. That was total top-line revenue. And it was one product. You could get a vase or one of our trademark burlap wrap bouquets, but it was much smaller than our product now. And what I found is that consumers weren't purchasing them for other people. They were purchasing them for themselves. And I was really confused because I thought I was going into the gifting category. So I'm like, what's going on? So I did a little focus group, which just means I took everybody to a wine bar and plied them with liquor and a couple hors d'oeuvres and asked them questions if they'd bought from us 2 times or more that year. And I had a group of 11 women that were wonderful and gave me really good feedback. They told me that they love my flowers, but they were too small because they were much smaller than our current sizes, and it was a lower price point because one of my missions was to make flowers accessible to anyone. So it was a $25 price point, about half the size of our current small. And so they thought that it was a good bouquet, kind of equivalent of going to a grocery store. They would pay a little bit more for a nicer product, but it was equivalent of just going to the grocery store and buying themselves flowers. But if they were going to send a gift, they wanted to send something bigger. And then the thing I'd never thought of was they didn't want the recipient to know how much they'd spent on them. And by having one price point, the recipient, and I would have never thought of that. I was like, I figured out that I was making myself the Taco Bell of flowers, and that's not what I wanted to be, And so I went back to my apartment, that was also my workshop / everything, and added sizes and figured out that we just code it so the recipient doesn't know what size they got, but we know when we're delivering it, and immediately people started buying for other people when I did that. So I think it's really important to get your product out there and test it in the market because you're too close to it, and what you're thinking isn't what everybody else is thinking, and it's really hard to get your ego out of it and think that everybody doesn't think like you because you think you're brilliant. I thought I was brilliant, and I knew all the answers, but I didn't, and so then getting that feedback from customers really quick. And we have our customer service team sits right next to where I sit and our managers sit, and I can hear every single thing that's coming in through customer service because I want to know. I want to know when, we're getting, people are saying that our flowers are boring, and I'm like, I've never heard that before. Why, and so then I'll get on the phone with the customer and be like, what's boring about it? Tell me more, and find out that it happens to be just because it's Valentine's Day and it's the only time that men order, and they think our flowers are boring compared to women. But, and you find out a lot of information just by asking your customer. And if you didn't have your product out there, how could you get that information?
Great. So on this topic of talking to customers, do you think that being a woman has impacted your ability to talk to customers positively or negatively, or influenced the way you do customer discovery compared to kind of, what's taught in textbooks or what you see others doing? And can you reflect at all on whether or not you think kind of your gender has impacted your approach to lean startup methods at all?
That's a really interesting question because I think it's one of the few areas where it's beneficial to be a woman in technology. I think you're a lot less threatening. For example, I do a lot of street photography, and I feel like I have a much easier time taking photos of people because they're not threatened by me necessarily sometimes. And I think it's similar in customer discovery or when I'm approaching them about new ideas that I have. And it could be because there's a general bias out there that says, women are not as supported in the technology sphere, and so maybe people are trying to overcompensate for it, which I will take any day. I think that's totally fair. And I would say I don't know any place where it has even hurt me. So I was in financial technology for 2 of the startups that I was a part of, and finance is not an area where lots of women work or create products or whatever. And so there would be some areas where I would try to bring in someone who was a regulator who was an investment banker and they'd worked in this industry forever, and they would be meeting with the head of product and design at this new tech startup, and then they would meet me and they'd be like, what is this young girl who's all the intersections of minorities I can think of talking to why is she this one? So I think it helps me by being the underdog in those scenarios. So I can surprise them hopefully by not being all the things that they think I am.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. No, it's good. So I don't think it's hurt me with customers at all. I actually think customers really appreciate it when they're just heard by anybody. And especially if they're like, wow, the CEO's calling me to get my opinion on this, which is, I think, like, people like that, and they're kind of just thrown off by that, because usually people outsource customer service and, nobody really is talking to them. I think it definitely has been challenging in other areas that aren't customer facing. I think also one of the other really good positives, though, is almost all of the other flower startups, new, old traditional guys, everything, are all 100% owned by men. And 80% of people that buy flowers are women, for women. Nobody knows that. Everybody thinks guys are the ones buying flowers. They don't, unless they're in trouble or it's Valentine's Day. So I think it helps me tremendously being a woman. We actually were a product-first company, we like to say, and we care about the product. If you go into all of our competitors' places, you won't see a flower, because other people are making them for them, where we make everything in-house, and we have designers making them, because women, the reason that sales were declining is because we didn't like what was out there. So why are we going to do the same thing over and over and over again? We're going to do something different. And it's really helped us being woman-owned, I think, because we have the design aesthetic that other women want. And I love that we're also the sleeper on that, because all of the other people have raised a tremendous amount of VC money. And so everyone's like, oh, it's just that girl in San Francisco, whatever, And we're like really growing, and we're kind of the one that they're like the sleeper one that I'm just really excited. I don't want them to know much about me. It's good for that. So there's been other challenges. I definitely think it affected my inability to raise capital. I will say that really straightly. Being a solo female founder without the pedigree, I think really affected that. I'm really happy about that now that I didn't. And then also, which this is really weird, but flower sourcing and supply chain has been more difficult, I think, as a woman, because you wouldn't think this, but the flower industry is all men. All men. You would never think that. It's like fashion. You would think it'd be women running it. No, it's not. And it's a lot of old school, third, fourth generation, 100% male-owned flower companies, growing companies, wholesalers, and that's been pretty challenging from the supply chain standpoint.
Got it. Thanks. Can we talk a little bit about capital? So you just mentioned that you we'll stay on you, because you were just talking about it, that you decided not to go the VC route. Can you talk a little bit about that decision, how that's impacted the way you're running your business, maybe the leanness that your business has had to take on as a result? Can you talk a little bit about sort of how that has played into your business model and approach?
So I didn't really decide not to raise capital. It decided for me not to raise capital. But like I said, I'm really happy that we didn't now. So the biggest learning that I have overall from having a company is that success does not equal funding. And it sounds very basic, but it's not. It really isn't. I fell into this trap of thinking, because every networking event I would go to, people would ask, the first, second, or third question out of their mouth would be, what round are you on? Who's funded you? And as soon as you would say that you're bootstrapped, they look directly over your shoulder for someone more important to talk to. And you're left trying to validate yourself, oh, hey, we're the 14th fastest private, company in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why am I having to validate myself to these people? Because they think I'm not important enough to talk to. And so and that was the first reason. Second reason that I was trying to raise capital was because out of fear, which is never a good place to be, right? Yeah. And you make really bad decisions, and I made some bad decisions. Yes, I was on a really bad reality show. Everybody will ask me about that every time, but it was out of fear, and I was really scared because I saw all of these strikingly similar, is the legal term I'm allowed to say, strikingly similar companies pop up, raising millions and millions of dollars, and I really thought I was going to be the friendster to their Facebook. And I got really scared, and I thought, I have to go raise capital. They just raised $30 million. I need to go raise, because everywhere I'm going, people are asking if we're this company now, instead of us who, it was really demoralizing and really scary. And so I thought, I have to go raise capital. So I went and I pitched to 26 different companies on Sand Hill Road and in Boston, New York, and thought, this is going to be easy. We have huge growth. I mean, our numbers are really good. And it was not easy. And now that I look back, I wouldn't want to fund me. We're not a good funding. I'm trying to build a long-term sustainable business that treats our employees right, that isn't just worried about the net profit margins. And those decisions are more important to me than what's going to do a very immediate J-curve, basically, hockey stick. So, but the reason I was doing it was for those two reasons. And once I stepped back and thought, why am I trying to raise capital? It's because I'm afraid and because of my ego because I need to feel successful, and to feel successful, I have to get Andreessen Horowitz to, invest in me or whatever. And failed at it, felt horrible, overate a bunch of carbs, gained a bunch of weight, whatever. No, and then realized I don't need funding. I can just grow, the way a company should grow, in my opinion. And we're a perishable product company that's also a service. We're going to be really lucky to get 15% net profit margins. Like, that's not a good investment for most VCs. And now I don't feel like I have to justify, that I'm successful in spite of getting funded. I think I actually wear it like a badge of honor. Like, hey, $49,000 investment to $10.5 million in sales in 5.5 years is pretty phenomenal, and that's okay. We're okay without it. And we'll just grow. We'll get to the $1 billion. It's just going to be a 20 to 25 year trajectory to the $1 billion instead of a 5 to 9 year mark. But I'll own 95%. My employees will own 5%, and I'll go back and have my pretty woman moment where I'm like, big mistake, and that's it. So.
Good. So you said you were part of various financing rounds at Wealthsimple. So can you talk a little bit about that experience and how the decision to raise certain types of capital impacted the business model?
Yeah, so I've only worked at venture-backed companies, and I think we have this notion in the startup world that if you haven't raised money, you don't matter. And I think it's sort of, I want it to be time that we think differently. So MailChimp is a great example. Basecamp is a great example of these large technology companies that were built without taking financing. And Jason Fried spoke earlier at this conference, is phenomenal, and his company's doing phenomenal stuff, and they're okay being where they are without taking any money, and constantly talking about valuation. And valuations are really just projection. Nobody actually know. It's not a liquid thing that you can be okay, that's $20 billion. I can cash this out. So I think we need to be thinking about it a little more carefully. And what I've learned sort of throughout. So Wattpad, which was the first company, and we did 2 rounds of financing during my time there. It was really interesting because it's sort of been around, and the co-founders, Alan and Ivan, had been very specific about bootstrapping it. And it was at the time when, smartphones weren't a thing, and it's an e-reading company, so we literally built apps for feature phones, and you had to click that scroll button to read. They built this community up where investors were knocking on their door asking to invest. And I think that's a really good position to be in. I think that is the kind of position that I want to be in if I am raising financing. And given a little bit of my background and a little bit of the interest in the healthcare space, we've been really fortunate where we've had investors asking us if they can invest in the company. But I think, again, we're so early on, we're 2 months old, we're so early on that I think we have to be really careful about who we let in at what stage, because once you give up that control, even if it is, the 10, 20% and give up a board seat, you're now becoming a little bit of an employee at your own company, depending on, how much financing you're taking. And I've been a part of companies where we took on too much financing at the wrong time, and I think it hurt the company more than it helped it. And it's really easy now that the investment sort of market is so ripe and everybody's a venture capitalist and everybody wants to invest their money. It's really easy to take in tens of millions of dollars when you don't really know how you will spend it. And if you can raise on your terms, that's what I would suggest. Given that we are in healthcare, which is it's an expensive industry to be in before you can get traction or whatever it is, or make it really big. I'm not being naive. I do know that we will need venture capital at some point, but I think I will be a lot smarter about when I raise and exactly how much amount I raise and on what terms I raise, so that I can, I can work at my own company and not just somebody else's, because I went through all this trouble to start my own company only to become an employee at it. That's not what I want eventually. But yeah, I'd love sort of to give more importance to companies like Christina's that do self-fund or that fund using their own revenue. I think there's a lot of power in that. I think startups are in their own little bubble, if I can call it, where the last thing we think about when it comes to money is revenue.
I know. Yeah.
A business, the whole point of a business is to create value, and a lot of value is usually money. So think about that from the beginning. But I find so many startups don't. They're like, well, I'm going to amass 80 million users, and then I'll think about money. And I'm trying to stay away from that.
Yeah. So I've been having conversations with people throughout the last couple of days. Actually, we're going to stay on you because I want to follow up on something you said. I've been having conversations with people over the last couple of days who are getting to the point where they're thinking about raising financing. I think most of them are thinking venture capital. And so they are sort of asking this question of who do I raise from? How do I evaluate if they're a good investor? How do I think about, the way that conversation should go? So you mentioned like you'll think a little differently about who you take money from and all that. So can you talk a little bit about the lessons you learned about kind of the right and wrong way to take money, and in specifically, who the right kinds of people are in your mind to take money from?
No, for sure. I think specifically if you're looking at giving up a board seat, you have to look at the partner that you're going to get access to. So Wattpad's Series A was Union Square Ventures out of New York, and the thing that USV stands for is network. So they really care about the kinds of networks, and you know this, networks of users that you have out there. So they invested in another Toronto company called Figure One, which is a healthcare company, which is an Instagram for doctors, and they care about how many doctors across how many geographies are using it and how are those interactions happening. And for Alan and Ivan at the time, it was really important that the investor they were bringing on was paying attention to the right things. A big part of Wattpad and the mass amount of readers and writers that were constantly coming to their sites was the network, and how could they learn from other portfolio companies. And we did. We learned a lot from Foursquare. They'd invested in Tumblr. We learned a ton about younger audiences there. So I think paying attention to the person who's going to be coming onto your board, Andrew, who did come onto our board, knows a ton about e-reading, like blogs a ton, like writes a lot of stories, and that is very, very, I think, important. Another thing is like look at the rest of the portfolio companies that they invest in. So, for example, there's a venture capital company called Venrock that like heavily invests in healthcare startups that is in California. And maybe if you're a healthcare company, you need to be looking at Venrock because they know a ton of these roadblocks that healthcare companies have seen and how to avoid them. Yeah. And then looking at the kind of control again that you're giving up to different companies. I won't say which ones, but some of the VC firms do have like a bad reputation in like replacing the founder right away because that's just what they've done in the past. So do your homework, think about the kinds of things that they've done in the past, and ask yourself if you're okay with it. Sometimes if you're like desperate or if you want to like sell or get acquired, whatever, maybe it's okay to take that money. But I think the way we're going to think about it is, the board person that we're getting, the kind of control that we're giving up, and what we need them. I really like when companies do like strategic investment, and that word is a little problematic. I get it, but what can this venture capitalist give you aside from just money? Yeah. If you just wanted money, would you go to the same person, or what additional thing can they offer you? So, Venrock can offer you access to a lot of different healthcare companies. USV can teach you more about networks. Maybe think a little bit about that.
Great. Okay, last question for me, for Christina, and then I'm going to open it up to you all. So start thinking about your questions, and as soon as you're ready, come to the mic, and I'll turn it over to you all. So the last question I want to ask is about employees at your company and hiring and firing. I work with a lot of startups, and if I had to say maybe the hardest thing to teach someone how to do that's starting a startup for the first time is how to hire the right people, how to know when to let go of people when it's just not working out. And it sounds like you have a really great employee base that you value a lot. So can you talk a little bit about lessons you've learned in hiring and firing over the years?
Yeah, so we have, it's a little bit different employee pool than most companies around here. We're actually building a manufacturing facility in San Francisco, which is really nuts, by the way. So we have 82 employees and our team members, and but most of them are not I'm this entire C-suite and above, just be really honest. So like I don't have a COO, CFO, CMO, CTO. I do all of that. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot of work. But I have amazing floor managers and production managers. Like I said, we do everything in-house. So we do design, we do delivery. We have bike couriers all over the city. If you've seen them out with flowers, those are our guys and girls. They're amazing. And customer service and shipping, everything is in-house. And I find that if, we find really good talent 90% of the time, but the 10% of the time that we don't, we just need to get rid of them very quickly. We don't have the ability to have any fat at all. So we do trial shifts with people before we ever interview, because it's not even worth interviewing until they come in and actually see what it is, because we have a very robust digital presence, and people romanticize what we are and think that it's going to be this cute little flower shop based on our Instagram feed. And then they come in and they're like, whoa, what is this? And there's quotas, like we call it Ford Motor Company. So there's quotas you have to do. It's definitely more production mode. And so if it doesn't work out, we want them to be free to find a good fit. I think one of the reasons that we have really good talent, though, and that we keep good talent is that we treat our team members right. And I think that's something that sets us apart. So in this gig economy that we're in, we aren't that. So I'm always on the panel next to the Uber guy or to whatever, which is like, I'm like David and Goliath here, the epitome of that. But I really strongly believe in taking care of your team. So anybody who wants full-time is full-time with full benefits, 100% benefits, same benefits that my husband has at Facebook. We have a very good benefit program for them. Not free lunch, though. We are very scrappy. We drink out of a hose. I'm not joking. We are extremely scrappy, and I want to do what's right for my team. And I don't give them the option of like free lunch or medical insurance, because probably 90% of my team, given how young they are, would say free lunch, but that's not what's important for them. So I'm going to be the mom, and I'm going to get them a 401k before I get them free lunch, or, because 20 years from now, they're not going to remember that pizza. I think it's really important to me if we're putting people in harm's way, especially bike couriers, for goodness sakes. And most of the bike couriers you see all around town for a lot of the other companies, none of them have workers' comp or medical insurance. And if they get hit by a car, that's their livelihood, and it's really important that we take care of them. And so I think they see that, and they know how much we're really trying to do what's best for them. And we also pay, I can't say living wages, because in San Francisco that's like kind of impossible. But, we pay on average of $19-20 an hour, which is a lot more than minimum wage for what we're asking them to do. And so I just think that that's really key. You can't expect people to really care about their job if you're not caring for them. So.
Great. Okay, questions from you. Come on up. I know you have them.
I'll take one for the team.
Great.
Thanks. Hi, thanks. You guys, I'm not mic'd. Can everyone hear me?
I'll repeat the question, too.
Okay, great. My question's about gender lens investing. So, Christina, your business is something I think many people would consider traditionally feminine, and that you sell to women a product that appeals to many women, whereas Huda's experience is almost entirely in industries that are not dominated by that voice. What role do you think gender lens investing has or could fill for both of you as entrepreneurs facing very different problem sets?
So quick repeat of the question, then I'll let you guys take it. So the question is about gender lens investing. As the person who asked the question pointed out, Christina's business is sort of more traditional feminine business, a business
Lifestyle.
selling to women. The industries Huda has been part of are traditionally sort of male-dominated industries, financial services, healthcare. So the question is, what role could gender lens investing play in each of the businesses that they have been part of? Was that a good summary of what you said? Yes? Okay.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You want to start or me? Okay, so yeah, we're definitely, if I heard lifestyle business one more time, I was going to throw up. I'm like, it's a business. It's a good business. But I think that my experience was, I can't really say negative, but it was eye-opening. So every single scenario, at most there was one woman in the room. It was always 5 to 7 50-year-old white men, basically, that I was pitching to most of the time. And expecting them to understand my business was really challenging. And they aren't the ones that buy flowers. And when I would ask them, when I'd get their feedback, and I'd ask them, well, who here has bought flowers in the last year? Only one time did anybody raise their hand, once, out of 26 pitches. There are 26 companies, multiple pitches for each company. So I think it would help a lot to have more specific, I actually think that we just need to get more women in the room. I think, one of my bright ideas was that we need to get like a consulting company of, females that will go into these VC firms and like just tell them like what they're buying, I'm sure that exists somewhere, but because it was just really frustrating. Meeting number 6 with a large investment company on Sand Hill Road, I actually heard, we don't like your flowers as much as the other ones. And I'm like, we're the fastest growing flower company. We're like, highest rated, most reviewed, like women love our flowers. And then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I just did a focus group the Valentine's Day before and asked men and women which bouquet they preferred. And our bouquet, or this one that looks more like a grocery store one, and 40 out of 40 women picked ours, and 39 out of 40 men picked the grocery store one. So it's like trying to get them to understand what women want is just very challenging and difficult, and kind of I just felt like it was a brick wall a little bit, even if you have the numbers. So my experience is that we need something to change in industries where female consumers make up the major demographic of consumer base, basically.
No, for sure. I think it's interesting that we don't have many female VCs out there, and I think it directly reflects the kind of funding that goes where it goes. Lots of VCs sit on that table and try to imagine themselves in you. And if you're an old white man, it's very difficult to imagine yourself in me. Let's be honest. And so I think just even having a female presence or having minority presence or having a representative group that is not homogenous helps a lot. I'm trying to think of all the people that we've spoken with, and I feel like most of the partners that either get in touch with me or that we've spoken to in the past tend to fall in one of the minorities that I'm a part of, and I don't think that's a coincidence. There was another study that I was recently reading about how when there's a female partner in a venture capital firm and they invest in a female entrepreneur, that company actually does better. And it could be lots of different factors, and it's a new study, so whatever. It could mean nothing. But I think that's really interesting to think, how does that impact the people that you're going to reach out to? As a female entrepreneur, you're more or less likely to get in touch with a female VC than you are with a male VC. And I will tell you that I'm more likely to get in touch with a female VC, even though I work and live and breathe in these pretty male-dominated fields. So, we definitely need, I feel like, representative people everywhere across the board. So this is like our teams, who is building our products, people investing in our products, people like pitching ideas on all these products. And it's weird when I look at all these female, like all the consumers are female, but actually you have 0 females working for you. I know so many companies where it's so easy. And another thing that's interesting coming from a minority or person of color point of view is that investors and accelerators, popular ones in this area, are really big on investing in minority founders who are solving a minority problem. So they're not into, so if you're, if you're a person of color who's, or actually, better one, if you're a Muslim girl who wears a headscarf and she's trying to solve a problem of other Muslim girls who wear headscarves, like they're more likely to invest in you. But if you're a Muslim girl who wears a headscarf who's trying to solve healthcare, they're like, actually, maybe a white guy should do that. Like, maybe that's not the best. That I don't understand. I think that part needs to change. Like, I don't actually know how to talk about it either, because I can't say it up front to them and be like, is that why? And they're gonna get like, they're gonna kick me out real quick. So yeah, just having representative groups, I think it'd be an interesting path for me to take if I ever end up becoming a VC, where I'm gonna be like, throw your minority at me, do it.
I actually have a follow-up question for you. So, given that you're trying to solve a problem for women, your customers are women, how has that shaped who you've hired onto your team, and how do you think about sort of gender diversity across your team balanced with hiring for the skill sets you need on your team and all that?
It's really important to me that I don't have all female designers and all male delivery crew. So that was when we first started, just organically, people coming in and applying for jobs. That's what I saw. I was like, this is so not okay. All, young female girls doing this and all men doing delivery. So we tried to hire the opposite gender, and it's very important for us to have diversity as well. We actually hired some wrong people into roles just because we wanted some male designers and some female couriers, and we're like, okay, we should not do this, but we are very cognizant of it. And thankfully, as we grew, they just naturally, it's still heavily, we have 3 guy designers. I'm very proud of those 3 guys designers, but I would say, our delivery crew is 60-40 male female now. So, we're very, and customer service, I don't want all female. So, it's, thankfully there's a lot of people who want to work at Farmgirl, so I'm very happy about that. So we have a pool to draw from. But it's important that we don't have all.
Yeah, great. Okay, what else? What else do you guys want to hear? Yes.
Can you talk about if and how the ecosystems you have been in, and maybe even how the Lean Startup process kind of de-risked the process of becoming an entrepreneur, or even you're thinking about making that leap into being an entrepreneur?
Actually, Christina is a great person, and I'll go first so that I don't have to follow her. In terms of sort of de-risking, I think a lot of that, again, comes back to financing, which I'm talking a lot about, but it's really easy to take money early on and then have the VC take all the risk versus you taking the risk. And I think the Lean Startup methodology is really important there, because you can actually show a lot of traction or show a lot of people using your product by just putting out little snippets of something out there. So the first version of my current product was a spreadsheet. spreadsheet. It was like a glorified spreadsheet that was password protected, and my clients could log in and plug in the password and go in there and see it. And then I was noticing how many times they were logging in, or what information they were looking at, or what they didn't care about. And those are all things that, even though I'm doing like a concept pitch, if I were to raise money or whatever it is, those are things that I can actually talk about. And I think de-risk it for myself, because sometimes we will like build features into our like beta that like people don't actually use, but I've put in like a lot of time into it. So if I can build a little bit of it, and I'll fake some things where I'll be like, click on this button if you want this. Or this is an example. I don't actually do it. But at one of the companies I was at, Wave, we started going into tax time, and we were like, do you need an accountant, because it's a small business platform? We were like, do you need an accountant to do your taxes? And like we made a button, but that button did nothing. So we just tracked like how many people were actually clicking on it before we went full on building that thing out. And I think that's the build, measure, learn is really important, because we keep throwing away stuff. I've thrown away more lines of code than I've kept. And I think that's really important. I hope to be able to keep doing that instead of sort of getting married to my ideas and having like feature bloat, which ends up happening most of the time.
Yeah, I think it's great for validation and permission. So validation in that reading the book, I read it actually after I quit my job, so I'm glad that it did this. It validated me. It validates the ability to be scrappy and have that be okay, and not feel like you're just not being prepared. Like I said, I have so many friends that like overdo everything before they ever put something out there, and they seem so prepared all the time on it, and like they're going to be so prepared when they do this launch. I just really hope that somebody doesn't come beat them to it, because it's been 2 years since they've had this idea and working on it, where I was riding by the seat of my pants basically, and it gave me validation that was okay and that was actually the right thing to do, and permission to do it that way, to build, measure, learn, and to get a MVP out there and to just go with it. And I really, to me, like I have no education, no formal education either, by the way, which I didn't go to college, and so I think I read every business book that I could get my hands on, and really this one resonated with me because it just was a lot of common sense, and that I really appreciated. That's how I want to run my company, no matter when we are at the $1 billion mark or at the $10 million mark. I want to run it that way, no matter what. And so I really appreciate that about it, and it helps. Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Yeah, come on up.
Hey, Huda, Christina, thank you for this. Really appreciated hearing your insights. So my question is, as a male who actually gives a shit, like for lack of a better word, how does somebody demonstrate empathy without veering into benevolent sexism? And I can define the latter term.
Good question.
Yeah.
That's a deep question.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's really good.
That's super. So thank you for giving a shit.
Yes.
That's important. I always say I think it's really important to recognize your privilege, and then become an ally for those with lesser privilege in any setting. So this could be, and I've seen this happen countless times, almost every meeting I'm in where there's males and females, where a female will put up an idea and nobody will pay attention to it until a male repeats the same idea. So in moments like those, it would be great if you, being a male, can actually back that idea up or call that out and say, actually, didn't she just mention that same thing? And being able to I'm used to being the shit disturber in a lot of the organizations that I'm a part of, but that's a terrible position to put anyone in. If you're like the only person who should always stand up for all the minority rights because you happen to be at the intersection of all of them. And it's really important for other people to back this person up, or even be the first people pointing this out, so that I'm not having to take the fall literally all the time and becoming the person that they just avoid. And they're like, actually, we'll do this super racist party, but won't tell her. And it'll be okay. So I think, the he for she campaign, I think Emma Watson.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
I think Emma Watson said it really well, where it can't just happen where it's just like, no, only women can do this. But I think it's really important to also give, whatever the minority might be, the space to do their own thing when they need it, and for their voice to be heard when they need it as well. Balance to strike.
She just took everything pretty much. I would just second the fact that I think the most frustrating thing for me is when the people that I work with just don't acknowledge that is there, and that I hear all the time, you're crazy, you crazy feminist. And it exists, and just acknowledge it. Like, it's fine. If you want to sell your flowers to all of my male counterparts but me, just say it's because I don't have that part, just tell me that. Like, don't say, like, a bunch of different excuses that then I have to come and tell you, well, that's not true because of this, and that's not true because of this, and all that. Just tell me that you don't want to sell me flowers, or whatever. I'm just using that as an example. Like, just acknowledge that it's there, and so I don't have to look like the crazy feminist, So, and then, I'm married to like the most wonderful feminist man who is all for the he for she campaign as well, and I think that that's just really important, that it's not just the women standing up for women or the minorities standing up for minorities. I think it has to be like we're all in this together, Please, yeah.
So there's this, I can listen topic that you see the problem that you're going to solve, and that's how you become an entrepreneur. But I met more people who decided first to have their own company, and then look for ideas, and then find one, and they're great entrepreneurs. So how do you think, how it goes in your story, and how you think, what's a good reason to become a
So I'll repeat the question really quick. So the question was, a lot of times the sort of methodology that we're taught is find a problem you want to solve and then decide to be an entrepreneur to solve that problem. But what she's noticed, and I've noticed too, is there are a lot of people who kind of do it the opposite way. They say, you know what, I want to work for myself, I want to build something, I want to start a company. They make the decision to do that and then figure out what the company is going to do. And there is some success in doing it that way too. So kind of going against sort of the recommended path, I guess. So the question was, how did you guys get started, and how do you think sort of the two approaches kind of can work?
That's a really good question. The chicken egg, which came first. So we've gotten great press, and all the people doing stories on us always want to hear that, like, I grew up, playing in my grandmother's garden, and I love flowers and all of that. And no, I had taught myself how to arrange flowers from YouTube. It had nothing to do with that. I was the latter. I wanted to start a business, and I didn't know what I wanted to be in. So I would, really annoy all of my friends and family with, different ideas every week. And every girlfriend's night would turn into like a focus group on like, hey, what do you guys think of these iron-on pockets? Or, whatever, it was. And true story, pockets.com, still a brilliant idea, I think. But so I knew I wanted to start a company. I didn't know what I wanted it to be about. I knew I wanted it to do something good in the world, and I wanted to be able to be passionate about it. And it'd be hard to get passionate about toilet paper, although I think it's really brilliant that some people have. But to my chagrin, what my God-given talent was to make things pretty. So I knew it was probably going to be in a creative space, but it was just, looking for the industry that had a good opportunity and something that I could do without $3 million of initial investment, because I knew it was going to take a long time to save that amount of money. And that's when I came up with the idea for Farmgirl Flowers and just jumped. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons why I'm successful, is because I'm not so close to the product. Like in a lot of creative industries, what I find, people get into it because they just love flowers, or they love baking, or they love whatever, the creative, outlet that they're doing. And they don't know their numbers, they don't know COGS, they don't know, they're like, I just have to use this $12 stem of, King Protea. And I'm like, but it's a $40 bouquet. How are you ever going to make that work, So it's because they're so close and passionate about what they're doing, and they can't see it from the business perspective. And I'm definitely coming to it from the other side, and I think that that's really necessary in order, if you want it to grow to a big scale. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, no, I'm the opposite of that, which is why it's a great panel right here. But my co-founder and I had been sort of playing around with this idea about 9 months before I officially quit my job, and we'd actually been thinking about it for about 6 years now, which is a long time, but we knew sort of the space, like a fuzzy idea, but we didn't know exactly where we thought we would fit in best, and we wanted to make sure that our skill sets actually fit in really well with the problem itself. And so, I quit my job because I wanted to start this specific company, and it's the thing that I want to be really passionate about, and I feel like it's necessary if you want to keep going, because I'm not naive. I know this is just like the beginning, and I'm gonna go through lots of troughs of sorrow along the way, and I'm gonna like kind of hate myself or whatever. And I need to at least like really like the space that I'm working in order to be okay with it. And I've sort of seen a mixed bag of all the previous entrepreneurs that I've worked with, where some of them, like Al and Ivan, have like always thought about reading, like are avid readers and want to do e-reading. With Kirk and James at Wave, who sort of came together and they were like, oh, we have a cool team. What can we build? And I think they can both work, actually. I just happen to be the former. I'm just super passionate about using my powers for good in healthcare.
Great. Well, thank you. I think that is our time. So please join me in thanking them for sharing all their great stories.